with Detroit, that used to be one of the flagship cities of the world, that was just destroyed. It was just completely ruined. That city, the population, less than half of what it was at its peak, right? Well, outside, the population of the country has massively increased at the same time, right? And then, we see a lot of areas in Illinois. We see California, people are leaving. We see New York, people are leaving. And, people are voting with their feet and they're taking their money with them. They're taking their brains with them. Many years ago, I left the Socialist Republic of California, where you still are. You're hanging there long. I left 9 years ago. And I said that California would attempt to build an economic Berlin Wall to try and stop the money drain. It's my pleasure to welcome John Truman Wolfe back to the show. He is the author of several books, including The Coming Financial Crisis and the Strategic Intelligence Newsletter, I believe, right? Did I have that right?
Strategic Financial Intelligence, Jason.
Strategic Financial Intelligence Newsletter. John, welcome back. We had so many people that just loved your talk the last time. Over 120,000 views on YouTube, and like 576 comments, people having whole conversations about bank bail-ins. And boy, we can talk about that. I know you want to talk about lithium prices and investments a little bit there. Last time you were on, we talked about bank bail-ins, and that was a really popular piece that we talked about. Tons of views on YouTube and so forth, as I mentioned. Explain what a bail-in is real quickly, why this is a possibility and a concern, and especially couched in the political environment we're in, because as government, the one thing I say, and the one reason I really wanted to leave California for so long is, and I repeat this often, you never want to live in a jurisdiction where the government is desperate, where they are so desperate for money that they become predatory on their own citizens, with parking tickets, with red light cameras, with speeding cameras. These are all, the police are the modern day tax collector. They won't stop the riots and the destruction of Minneapolis or Philadelphia, or certainly not Portland or Seattle or New York, but heck, they'll give it tickets because that's where the money comes from, right? And so, you see that soccer mom going 5 miles an hour too fast in her Volvo, you better pull her over and give her a speeding ticket because you can raise revenue there. You're only going to lose money arresting people for rioting, right? So it's a messed up system, isn't it?
Yeah, don't let your parking meter run over in Los Angeles. I'm telling you, it's uncomfortable financially. And in terms of having to get your car if you happen to get towed. I'll be brief on this, Jason, and just kind of hit the high points.
The bail-in, yeah.
There has grown in the last decade or so a kind of security called a derivative. There are 1.2 quadrillion dollars worth of derivatives in banks on the planet. Most of these derivatives, these securities, are bets on the direction of interest rates. That's all they are. B of A says the interest rate on Greek bonds is going up. Deutsche Bank says they're going down. They bet. That bet becomes a security. People bet on those bets. People bet on their bets, and there's this pyramid of these Vegas-like securities. I think somebody's going to stick a bubble in that world.
You mean a pin in the bubble, right? Yeah.
A pin in the bubble. Thank you. There are $227 trillion worth of derivatives in the major New York banks. The godfather of the global financial mafia, the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, who basically rules banking on this planet, basically structured something to protect the banks from being taken down by derivatives exposure, and that's called bail-ins. Bail-in means that if a bank is troubled and going bankrupt, they have the right to take your deposits and convert it to bank stock. Take your deposits and convert it to bank stock.
So if you have money in the bank, the bank can just take it and say, instead of your deposit account, you now own stock in our bank.
In our failing bank.
In our failing bank. Yeah. Even if you didn't want to buy the stock in their failing bank.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's official policy in the EU. Canada adopted the policy a couple of years ago. And when you read the Dodd-Frank bill, it permits that in the United States. There's actually a memo online. People could go find it, written by the FDIC and the Bank of England jointly, that explains how bail-in policy would work here.
Wow.
So I just, I tell your listeners, make sure you're in a strong bank. I encourage them not to bank with the big money center banks. Find a good regional bank, because the big money center banks are the ones full of derivatives. But that's what a bail-in is. It's there. It's my opinion that the Bank for International Settlements didn't do this for no reason. So I don't like to prognosticate as I like
prognosticate. Hey, don't pull a Joe Biden on me.
Bad news, but I do think the banking system in the United States is going to have some trouble.
Yeah. So let me ask you about the derivative thing. Just super quickly, we'll wrap it up here. So, I've long called derivatives, I like doing these folksy, simple things, right? I call a derivative the thing about the thing. Okay. And so the interesting thing about derivatives is like any investment or any asset, there's always a counterparty. So if one person loses, another party wins. So my question is, those numbers with derivatives are obviously astonishing, right? They're insane numbers, right? The global GDP,
right,
just to give a comparison, is about 80 trillion a year, or 100 trillion a year, I think now.
About 100.
Yeah.
Trillion.
And the US is like 22 trillion a year or something like that. So that's a comparison for how massively giant the derivatives market is. But okay, say it collapses. So someone will lose and someone will win. The chairs move around in the game of musical chairs, but does it really lead to such a disaster?
Here's the question. Can the loser afford to take the hit? JP Morgan Chase, Jason, the last time I looked, had about $50 trillion worth of derivatives exposure.
Wow.
The numbers are eye-watering. They're almost, you can't even think with them.
Yeah.
So I think if one bank takes a hit, you'll have something like 2008 where it will just spiral out of control. It may or may not have anything to do with who's actually healthy and who's not. As we've seen, and as we've been talking about, it's a PR world. Mm-hmm. And the financial press can be as biased and as jaded as the political press.
Very, very disconcerting for sure. It goes to show you that the left has no interest in democratic principles. No. They have no interest in tolerance. They have no interest in debate, because their arguments won't withstand the scrutiny of debate. They simply vilify people and label them and negate them, and then they just censor them. And what we've got to realize is that these social media platforms have GDPs. In other words, their annual revenue of, say, Facebook is about the same as the country of Chile.
Yeah.
Do you realize how significant that is? These are not companies existing in a competitive market where you just can go somewhere else, right? These are companies that have totally monopolized their place in the market, whether they be Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Twitter. It's appalling what they are doing. It's just appalling. It really is.
Yeah, not
Google,
only
don't forget Google. Lest I leave Google out, but yeah, go ahead.
But monopolizing and abusing. If I'm close to anything, I'm libertarianish. Yet I would favor a control of these corporations so that they can't exercise that kind of abuse of the First Amendment. So I think they ought to pull this, Article 230 or Section 230 or
Of the
whatever.
Communications Decency Act. Yeah, the
Yeah,
CDA. Yeah.
they should pull it.
Yeah,
And
no,
let
they absolutely should. It's ridiculous. That was created at a time when the internet was just getting off the ground, and why is it that the New York Times, as much as the New York Times, I'm just using them as a bad example, but if they say something or print something in the New York Times, they can be sued for libel. Yet Google and Facebook and Twitter, they're just exempt from it, right? And then
yeah.
they can censor at the same time. It's absolutely ridiculous. They have the best of all worlds. It's ridiculous. I've been saying this for years, John. They need to be either split up under antitrust laws, regulated under the same types of laws utilities are regulated under, common carrier laws. And
Right.
let me just, again, for my listeners, give them an example. If we're on the phone together and the phone company doesn't like what we're talking about, as long as we're paying the bill, they don't have the right to cut off our phone service. Okay. Yet,
Right.
yet Facebook and Twitter is the most disgusting of all. But we don't know the type of censorship that, say, Google is engaged in, and even in Facebook either, right? Why do we see what we see in our news feed? Right? Why do we see what we see in our search results? We don't know. It's all secret. It's like this kangaroo court for information. It's a star chamber. It's North Korea. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. So split up under antitrust laws, regulated under common carrier laws, and or their algorithms need to be made public so everybody knows why they see what they see in their search results, etc.
I wrote a newsletter back some months ago, Jason, which started off with a representative from DARPA. I don't know if you or your
Yep.
listeners know DARPA's, which is basically the
Military.
Dr. Strangelove of American
Yep.
intelligence. Very, very dark people.
That was a great movie, by the way.
It was
Strange Love. Yeah. Stanley Kubrick.
one of the great ones. They don't get any better than Peter Sellers. Anyway, a representative from DARPA, the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA sit in a room as Sergey Brin and Larry Page rollerbladed in. This is when they're getting their PhD at Stanford. This is true story. And they would give them an update on how the research was doing and the development of that algorithm. And those government agencies would cough up money. So Google was funded by government intelligence. And if you look at the recruiting of the last few years, Google's executive staff is recruited from the NSA, from the CIA, et cetera. Google is a front for government intelligence. And
Facebook's been accused of that too. Supposedly the CIA was one of the original investors in Facebook.
They were. They just haven't been as abusive. But both of those companies, and look where they are. Look at the amount of influence they have on opinions. It's outrageous. I would agree with your comments on what should be done with them.
I was going to just talk to my listeners a little bit about real estate, but these artificially low interest rates have created this massive seller's market where properties are flying off the shelf, as you know. Just your opinion about these fake interest rates we have, these in real terms negative interest rates, right? If you look at the real inflation rate. Just like to get your thoughts on that, because you're a financial guy, and what do you think?
I think the Fed ought to get out of the business of keeping interest rates at zero, or as you say, minus. I mean, as you and your listeners probably may or may not know, there's, I think the figure's $13 trillion worth of actual negative interest rate bonds in Europe. And my concern is that it's coming, and there's some flawed thinking that, that's going to get people to take money out of the bank and spend it, and it's good for the economy. No, it just destroys the savings, particularly of seniors, retirees. I think it's a really bad policy.
Yeah, because the rates are artificially low, and older people tend to be savers, and they use that nest egg. And now, John, they're forced into all of these much more speculative, higher risk investments that they shouldn't be investing in at their age, right? They should
Yeah.
be able to, ladder their CDs or buy some conservative bonds, and that should be their maybe municipal bonds, but we know the municipalities are in big trouble, and the pension crisis. But they can't do that anymore, can they?
No, they can't. They can't do it. And you know, artificial is the exact right word. These interest rates, if the Fed got out of the way, would rise to where they belong. I don't know what that number is exactly, but it's certainly not zero or a quarter of a percent.
Give us your thoughts on the migration patterns. We saw, I mean, every place that is run by the left becomes a disaster. It's just amazing how accurate that is time and time again. We'll start with Detroit, that used to be one of the flagship cities of the world, that was just destroyed. It was just completely ruined. That city, the population less than half of what it was at its peak, right? Well, outside, the population of the country has massively increased at the same time, right? And then, we see a lot of areas in Illinois. We see California, people are leaving. We see New York, people are leaving. And, people are voting with their feet, and they're taking their money with them. They're taking their brains with them. Many years ago, I left the Socialist Republic of California, where you still are. You're hanging there long. I left 9 years ago. And I said that California would attempt to build an economic Berlin Wall to try and stop the money drain. And, that's actually a proposal now, right? They're talking about it. They've got the bill to do that, the wealth tax that is 10-year retroactive wealth tax. I mean, I could be liable for my last year there if they pass that. And you know what? Here's the thing about it, folks. It doesn't have to pass. Prop 13 doesn't need to get overturned in the next time around. The wealth tax doesn't need to pass this time. It's coming. Okay. Whenever, it's a slippery slope, this stuff is introduced, and then everybody starts to get comfortable with it. People rearrange their lives. Some people leave, others sort of accept, and then it passes. And here it is. What are your thoughts about the migration trends, John?
Well, let me just step back a little bit in terms of talking about the cities. I'm originally from San Francisco. I'm a San Francisco boy. I love that city.
Yep.
And it has just been destroyed.
I know.
Just destroyed. Starting with Gavin Newsom, who was the mayor there.
Yep.
I mean, here's a guy that was the mayor of the city. He has an affair with his best friend's wife. They're both working for him as the mayor. And so he's having an affair with his best friend's wife. It becomes public knowledge. The San Francisco Chronicle reports on it. And he kind of issues this mushy kind of apology. Gee, well, things happen. And then he becomes governor. What he's doing, I mean, there is a serious effort to recall him. I don't know if it'll come off, but he should be thrown out of office in a heartbeat. So he's destroyed San Francisco. Eric Garcetti would do the same to Los Angeles. Yeah. So back to the migration, I've got a lot of friends leaving California, a lot of friends. They're going to Arizona. They're going to Texas.
They're going to Nevada, a lot of them. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I got a very good buddy and just moved over there. So, people do vote with their feet. And the answer to the finances of it is, oh, good, we'll raise taxes.
Yeah. And then more people leave.
Which is what I was going to say, just drives more people out. Yeah. If I weren't, I'm living in a gorgeous mountain community north of LA. I love it here. If I weren't here, I would pack up and go.
Yeah. No, I understand. If Biden wins, you combine the California tax with the Biden tax, your effective tax rate in California would be 62.8%. Can you imagine? Plus, that's just income tax. It doesn't include all the other taxes we all pay. I mean,
that's right.
Wow. That's just unbelievable. You've been researching lithium a lot lately, and obviously electricity is a big deal. Battery technology is a big deal. What's going on in that market? What were you going to say about that?
I just published today our monthly newsletter on that subject, on lithium. The title of the newsletter is Lithium the New Oil? And you need lithium for rechargeable batteries. So think about cell phones, think about computers, think about that kind of thing, and then start looking at the electric vehicle market, which publicly is driven by Elon Musk and Tesla and U.S. car manufacturers. But the EV market, the electrical vehicle market, is booming in China. It's booming in India. And these cars need lithium for their batteries. So it's a hot area, kind of a somewhat new area of investments, and it's going to grow and grow. So, watch for good lithium stocks. I actually mentioned a couple in the newsletter. I'm a big fan of that as an investment area now.
John Truman Wolfe, what is your website?
strategicfinancialintelligence.com. Bit of a mouthful, strategicfinancialintelligence.com.
John Truman Wolfe, thanks for joining us again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.